Myself M. Gunakar, Assistant Professor of Zoology, Government Degree College, Siddipet, Telangana State. Today let us discuss prawn digestive system. This topic is included in the Zoology, BSc Zoology first year, first semester. Before discussing the prawn digestive system, let us have a look at the systematic position of prawn. Prawn belongs to the phylum Arthropoda because of the presence of jointed legs. It belongs to the subphylum Mandibulata because of the mandibles, presence of mandibles. It belongs to the class Crustacea because it has gills, green glands, two pairs of antennae and biramous appendages. And it belongs to subclass Malacostraca, divided into 19 pairs of its body is having 19 pairs of appendages, and of which 13 pairs of appendages are of cephalothoracic appendages and 6 abdominal appendages, and adults bear stalked compound eyes. Because of these two reasons, it is included under subclass Malacostraca, and it is included under Decapoda because of the presence of 5 pairs of walking legs. And family Palaemon, and then its scientific name is Palaemon malcolmsonii. That is, genus is Palaemon and species is malcolmsonii. Otherwise, it is also called Macrobranchium malcolmsonii. Its common name is freshwater. The prawn digestive system can be studied under two heads. First is structural aspect and functional aspect. Structural aspect, under the structural aspect, the prawn digestive system we can study or we can discuss alimentary canal and digestive glands. Whereas in the functional aspect, the digestive system can be studied and under 5 steps. One is ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation and egestion or defecation. Coming to the prawn digestive system, we can have a look at the figure. This is the prawn digestive system showing prawn digestive system. So here, as we discussed just now, the structural aspect. Under the structural aspect, two things comes. One is alimentary canal, the other is digestive glands. As the prawn possesses only one digestive gland, that is Hepato Pancreas, only one digestive gland is included in this prawn. Let us discuss after discussion of this alimentary canal and its parts. As you know, the alimentary canal in almost all animals, it is an elongated tubular structure with varying diameters, and in the same way prawn is also no exception. It is the alimentary canal in the prawn is also divided into 3 parts, mainly foregut, midgut and hindgut. Foregut starts from mouth and it extends up to the stomach. Then midgut, then hindgut. Hindgut includes rectum as well as anus. Now let us start with the foregut. Now let us start with the alimentary canal, that is foregut. Just we have seen now foregut, otherwise called as stomodium, is having mouth, buccal cavity, esophagus, stomach. So mouth, let us start with mouth. Stomodium or foregut begins at the mouth, which is a large aperture on the ventral side of the head region. It is bounded in front by the labrum, on the laterals or on the sides by the incisor processes of the mandibles. Now you can see here the mouth is, you can see the mouth here, and incisor processes of the mandible on either side of the mouth, and labrum on the front side and labium on the back side, behind, labium behind. Then the mouth is a deeply situated cleft like structure and aperture, and then it leads into the buccal cavity. Now in the figure we can't see any buccal cavity here clearly, but the buccal cavity is present, and the buccal cavity next extends are the mouth, the buccal cavity, which is a short and compressed tube, but with thick chitinous lining is present with irregular folds, and the molar processes of the mandibles from the sides of the cavity are present here, which crush the food within in the buccal cavity. Now the buccal cavity leads into the esophagus. Now this is, you can see the esophagus here. This is the short, of course esophagus is a short but wide. It runs vertically upwards from the buccal cavity to the floor up to the floor of the stomach. So this portion is called stomach. So up to the floor of the stomach, the esophagus extends vertically. It extends now like this vertically up to the floor of the stomach. Now internally, you can see internally the thick muscular wall of esophagus is thrown into four folds, thrown into longitudinal, prominent longitudinal folds. Now we can have a look at this here. So we can see the mouth. It's a large slit-like aperture at mid-ventral on the head. It is bounded by labrum, incisor processes of mandibles and labium. We have seen just now. And buccal cavity, which is a thick chitinous lining, is present in the buccal cavity, and the molar processes lie at opposite sides, so they help in crushing of the food material. Now the esophagus, which runs up vertically upward, just now we have seen, it leads into the stomach. Then the cuticular lining bears short bristles and thrown into four folds. Just now I told you these are the four folds. One is the anterior fold, one posterior fold, and two lateral folds, like these two lateral folds. Now you can see in this figure the anterior fold, you can see here, anterior fold, and the posterior fold here. This is the posterior fold, anterior fold, and two lateral folds. So the lumen becomes somewhat, as the inner wall of the esophagus extends into folded, makes foldings. The interior or lumen of the esophagus becomes smaller. Then the food passes through this lumen into the stomach. Now let us continue to the stomach. As the stomach is a thin walled and is double chambered. Thin walled and double chambered. It occupies almost most of the cephalothoracic cavity. See here in the cephalothoracic cavities. Now in the earlier figure, you can see we have seen the stomach occupies almost this much of stomach is present. See here, this much, from here to here, this much of stomach is present, and this stomach almost occupies cephalothoracic region. Almost half of the cephalothoracic region is occupied with the stomach. It remains buried. See, this is this black portion, which is called Hepato Pancreas gland, is present. So the stomach remains buried laterally. See, lateral to the Hepato Pancreas, ventrally and posteriorly into the Hepato Pancreas. It is thin walled, as I said just now, and double chambered, consisting of divided into two chambers, two parts. I can say two parts. A large anterior, this is the large anterior chamber, and a small posterior chamber. Large anterior chamber is called as cardiac stomach, and the posterior smaller chamber is called as pyloric stomach. The inner lining of or intima of the cardiac stomach presents numerous foldings. Just now we will see the next slide. You will see the cardiac stomach. Here the cardiac stomach. It is a large chamber and many longitudinal folds with bristles. It has many longitudinal folds with bristles, and they are supported by, the walls are supported by some cuticular plates and folds and ridges also. Like for example, there is a circular plate. Is present. The circular plate we can see here. Now in the figure we can see easily. the circular cuticular plate. This is present at the junction of the esophagus, roof of the esophagus, and then circular cuticular plate, and then many longitudinal folds are present on the side on the cardiac stomach, and there is a combed plate is also present. In addition to this, hastate plates are also present, and all these plates, they have bristles. And this is the cardiac stomach. This greenish portion here, you can see this is the cardiac stomach, and it has many foldings. That means lateral longitudinal folds, the cuticular plates and folds are present, combed plate is present, hastate plate is present, and there is a filter plate. All these filtering plates are present, and all these folds are covered by minute bristles, and these are, now in this figure we can see many plates. Like clearly there is I already discussed, this circular cuticular plate is present at the when the esophagus open into the stomach, and there is immediately below that lanceolate plate is also present, and then folds and ridges comes. So lateral longitudinal folds, these are the lateral longitudinal folds, and inside of which mainly there is a hastate plate. So this is the hastate plate, and this hastate plate, because it is called hastate plate because it looks like the head of a spear, and the upper surface of the hastate plate is armed with a thick growth of setae. Thick upper surface, you can say setae. Here the setae are present, and then a distinct median ridge is also present. This is the median ridge, and this is the median ridge, and on either side of the hastate plate there is a combed plates are present here. See the combed plates here, this greenish color combed plates, and these combed plates joined in front, and but behind they open. They are opened behind the hastate plate. They open, and this opening leads into the pyloric stomach. This is an aperture. So this is a cardiopyloric aperture. This is a cardiopyloric aperture. This cardiopyloric aperture leads into the small pyloric stomach, and there are valves are also present. When the cardiopyloric aperture, when the food passes through the cardiopyloric aperture, there are some valves are also present, and these valves they control the passage of the food into the pyloric stomach. And the bristles which are present on either side of the hastate plate and combed plate, these bristles, they filter the food material. They filter the food material. Only fine and liquefied food only passes into the pyloric stomach. Just now I have been discussing the valves. The valves are present at the mouth of the cardiopyloric aperture. Here this is the cardiopyloric aperture, where there are many valves are present, like anterior valve is present, and the lateral valves are present, and posterior valves are also present. Actually these valves guard the cardiopyloric aperture, and this anterior valve is formed by the posterior triangular area of the hastate plate. Posterior triangular area of the hastate plate forms this anterior valve, and posteriorly a posterior valve is also present, which is just a semilunar fold of the posterior wall of the cardiac stomach. This posterior valve, it is a semilunar valve or fold of the posterior wall of the cardiac stomach. It functions as a posterior valve. Whereas on the sides there are a flap-like lateral valves are also situated. You can see lateral flap-like lateral valves are also situated, and due to these valves and folds, the opening appears, this opening cardiopyloric aperture or opening appears as a X-shaped structure. This is the X-shaped See, this is the X-shaped structure like this. It is a narrow and becomes sieve, that is filter like because of the presence of numerous setae are also present. Just now I discussed on the folds. The cardiopyloric aperture directly leads into the pyloric stomach, as I said earlier. Now coming to the pyloric. Now at pyloric stomach, I told you, when compared to the cardiac stomach, pyloric stomach is a small narrow chamber, and it is present below the posterior end of cardios. It is present below the posterior end of the cardiac chamber, and it divides into two small sections. And these two small sections, we can have a look at the figure. Now here, this is a small pyloric stomach, and this cardiopyloric stomach, cardiac stomach enters into the pyloric stomach or leads into the pyloric stomach through cardiopyloric aperture, just now I told you, which is guarded by many valves. Now here, this pyloric stomach has two small chambers. One is dorsal chamber. This is the dorsal chamber, and the one is ventral chamber. This is the ventral chamber. And this ventral chamber has a specialized shape because the floor of the ventral chamber is raised as a ridge. Because of this, ventral chamber is divided into two small plate-like or tube-like structures. This side wall of the pyloric stomach form very prominent lateral folds that come close to each other, and the folds divide the cavity of the pyloric stomach into two. These folds, actually these folds are also present. Because of the presence of folds, this is divided into dorsal chamber and ventral chamber. The floor of the ventral chamber, just now I told you, a pair of cuticular plates appear here, which are V-shaped, and the floor of the chamber, just now I told you, raised into a ventral median ridge and divides the cavity into two lateral compartments. The floor of the ventral chamber is covered by filter plate, each side of which is rectangular in outline, and it bears series of alternating ridges and grooves. The ridges bear bristles also. Here we can't see in this figure, but the ridges are present in these walls. Ridges are present and grooves are also present, and these ridges bear many rows of bristles which form the sieve plate like structure which filter the food material. And with closely set bristles together with the filter plate, it forms an efficient strainer or filter, and this is called pyloric filtering apparatus, and which allows only liquid food to pass through it. Now coming to just now I told you, the bristles which are found in this ventral chamber, they function as strainer or filter, allows only liquid food to pass through it. And then Hepato Pancreas, which is, I told you, it's a single largest glandular mass, opens into this ventral chamber through a pair of ducts which are called hepatopancreatic ducts, and the dorsal chamber of this pyloric duct, it leads into the midgut. Now coming to the midgut. So in the first figure we have seen the midgut, which is let us have a look at the figure. Yeah, we have seen in this figure midgut, which extends from the pyloric stomach. This is the pyloric stomach. This pyloric stomach, whose dorsal chamber leads into the midgut, and this midgut runs in the middle line is a long, narrow and straight tube running back along the median line up to the sixth abdominal segment, and its inner lining or internal lining is an epithelium, and which is in the posterior part, which is thrown into many longitudinal folds. longitudinal folds, and these folds reduces the internal lumen of the midgut. So just now we have been discussing the midgut. The midgut, or is also called mesenteron, is a very slender tube which follows the stomach and is without any chitinous lining. So the chitinous lining is present only in the stomodium and proctodium, but not in the mesenteron. And the internal epithelial lining, just now we'll see here. So internal epithelial lining of midgut consists of columnar cells. It consists of, see here, it consists of columnar cells, and so these are the columnar cells, green colors, columnar cells, and these columnar cells possess a large nuclei. The cells rest on the basal membrane, and it is enclosed by musculature consisting of thick outer layer of longitudinal muscle fibers, and then circular muscle fibers. The outermost layer of the wall of the midgut consists of connective tissue. This is the outermost layer, which is a connective tissue. The epithelial lining is this epithelial lining, which is thrown into the many folds and then reducing the lumen into narrow tube-like chambers. Then coming to the hindgut. As just now I told you, this midgut opens into the hindgut. Hindgut is a shortest portion of the alimentary canal, whereas the midgut is the longest portion and the hindgut is the shortest portion of the alimentary canal. It possesses two parts. One is a bulb-like rectum and as well as anus. Then its epithelial lining, hindgut, is also called proctodium. It terminates at the anus. Anteriorly, it has a swollen and forms a thick muscular sac which is gradually narrows down and becomes tubular. The innermost lining is cuticular in nature, and the epithelial lining thrown into long folds, reducing its lumen. Anteriorly I told you swollen part, then which is called as rectum, or also called intestinal bulb, and this rectum opens out through the anus. In the hindgut, the usual muscle layers are thin, but there is an additional thick layer of longitudinal muscle fibers are also present between the basement membrane and the circular layer of muscle fibers. The outer wall consists of connective tissue as usual, like that of the midgut. The inner lining is thrown into longitudinal folds, which are well developed anteriorly. They become smaller in the narrow tubular posterior portion of the hindgut, and that finally opens at the anus. The anus is a longitudinal slit-like opening, and which is situated on a raised papilla at the base of the telson. Now coming to the prawn digestive gland. As we have discussed, the prawn structural aspect of the digestive system has one alimentary canal and the digestive glands. Now we have discussed so far the alimentary canal and its parts. Now let us coming to the digestive gland. As there is only a single digestive gland, which is called as Hepato Pancreas in the case of the prawn, and which is a large bilobed glandular mass which is dense and is globular organ and orange red in color in the living state. It occupies large portion of the cephalothorax, and it consists of two separate lobes. It is also called sometimes the liver by some authors. The hepatopancreas consists of numerous tubules which are branched. These branches of the tubules are closely set and firmly held by connective tissue. Now you can see here in this figure, these tubules, we can see a cross section TS of the hepatopancreas here. So TS through the hepatopancreas, we can see the tubules here. These tubules are held together firmly by connective tissue, and this is the lumen, and you can see the connective tissue also here. Connective tissue, this connective tissue holds the lumens, holds the tubules in their place, and we can see the granular cells, ferment cells, many types of cells are present in this. These tubules arise from the hepatic CK that develop in the earlier stages actually. The canals of these tubules unite together and they form larger canals. And these larger canals again fuse, forming two large hepatopancreatic ducts. And these hepatopancreatic ducts open into the pyloric stomach. We have discussed already. One on each side just behind the pyloric filter plate. And each tubule consists of an outer layer which is called as Tunica Propria. Tunica Propria, and this Tunica Propria consists connective tissue with a network of circular and longitudinal muscle fibers. And this is followed by, this is the Tunica Propria is below that basement membrane. See, basement membrane here, basal membrane or basement membrane is present. Internal to the basement membrane lies the epithelial cell layer. This is the epithelial cell layer. See, this is the epithelial cell layer, which consists of tall cells of many varieties. Many varieties of cells are present here. See, the granular cells are present, ferment cells are present, and we can have the basal cells are present and hepatic cells are present. So here many types of cells are present. Granular cells, ferment cells, the hepatic cells, basal cells. All these types of cells are present in the epithelial, these epithelial cells, columnar epithelial cells. And these columnar epithelial cells are glandular also. And so this is the structure of hepatopancreas. And actually this hepatopancreas combines in itself the functions of three structures. One is pancreas, the other is small intestine, and the liver. Hepatic, hepato word coming from liver, and pancreas is pancreas, and it also combines the function of small intestine also. Like the pancreas, it secretes digestive ferments, that is juices, which can digest carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Like the midgut, or the small intestine, it absorbs the digested food material. It absorbs, the hepatopancreas also absorbs the digested food material. And whereas like the liver, it serves or it stores the food material like glycogen, fat and calcium also. So then even not only this, but some intracellular digestion is also, according to some authors, intracellular digestion also takes place in this hepatopancreas. So the hepatopancreas is a multifaceted organ which is a combination of pancreas, small intestine and the liver. So far we have discussed the prawn digestive system, in which structural aspect we have seen. Now let us discuss the prawn digestive system functional aspect. As I said earlier, functional aspect can be categorized into 5 processes, starting with the ingestion, then digestion, then absorption, assimilation and egestion, also called defecation. Now let us start with the ingestion. As we all know that the prawn is an omnivorous animal. It feeds on all types of food material. It feeds on mainly the algae, mosses, weeds and small insects. Like for example, small insects, not only small insects but snails, some tadpoles and small fish, and along with that some debris of the bottom. And here now the food is picked up by, mainly the food is picked up during the night time. That's why this is it is nocturnal nature. During the daytime it takes rest in the in the hidden places, and only it comes out especially during the early periods of the day and dusk. Then what parts can be useful for the ingestion? Now let us discuss. First of all, the chelate legs. These chelate legs pick up the food, they capture and convey the food to the mouth, and with the help of nathobases of the maxillae and maxillulae, which hold the food in position, and the incisor processes of the mandibles. Incisor process of the mandibles cut the food into small pieces. So maxillae and maxillulae help in swallowing the food because they hold the food in their its correct place, and then incisor processes of mandibles cut it into small pieces. In the buccal cavity, now what happens? The molar processes of the mandibles crush the food. Molar process of the mandibles crush the food. A wave of contraction is also produced in the esophageal walls, and which push the food directly into the cardiac stomach. And this also contraction also helps in helps to a little extent the mastication of the food, and this masticated food to the cardiac stomach will be pushed, and a type of suction force is created here to push the food material to the cardiac stomach, and from the cardiac stomach the liquefied food or small particles of the food are passed to pyloric stomach by the lateral grooves. Now after the ingestion, then second step of this functional aspect is digestion. So as I said, the molar process of the mandibles masticate the food. The food reaches cardiac stomach through the esophagus, and contraction and expansion of the stomach walls churn the food, and digestive ferments which are released by the Hepato Pancreas, they help in the digestion of the food material. Carbohydrates are digested to glucose, and the proteins are digested to amino acids, and the fats are digested to fatty acids and glycerol. So all the end products of the digestion are formed. Then as the food passes over the hastate plate in the cardiac stomach, the bristles of the combed plate, they cut it into smaller particles, fine particles, and this semi-digested food is not completely digested here, and it is a semi-liquid state. It is filtered through the bristles of the comb plate into the lateral grooves, and from the lateral grooves the food is carried to the ventral chamber of the pyloric stomach through the cardiopyloric aperture, and where in the pyloric chamber the digested food is filtered through the pyloric filtering apparatus, and the filtrate passes back into the remaining digestible material back into the hepatopancreas, and here the hepatopancreas almost the food is almost by up to here after passing into the pyloric stomach the food is digested completely, and then digested food reaches the hepatopancreas through the hepatopancreatic ducts, and then these in the hepatopancreas the food is absorbed, and the undigested food is passed to the dorsal chamber of the pyloric stomach, from where it passes back into the midgut. And if at all is there any material that is digested and is not absorbed completely, here after entering into the midgut it will be absorbed. So the next step is the absorption now. So from pyloric stomach food reaches the hepatopancreas through ducts, and where it is absorbed, and if at all any remaining food that is not absorbed, then it goes after entering into the midgut, the remaining food is also absorbed. Then undigested residue, undigested food is passed on to the next portion, that is hindgut. And whatever that is absorbed food, that is transported to all body parts through blood. Now coming to the undigested food, when the undigested residue or it is passed on to the hindgut, it enters into the rectum, where water present in the undigested food will be reabsorbed and the undigested food becomes dry, and this dry fecal matter passes out through the anus, and this passing out of the dry fecal matter through the anus is called as egestion or defecation. And so the dry residual fecal matter is only passes out through the anus. So this is all about the digestive system of prawn, that can be easily studied under two heads. One is structural aspect we have seen, the other is functional aspect. Whereas in the structural aspect we have discussed the alimentary canal and the digestive glands, as the prawn consists of only one digestive gland, that is Hepatopancreas, and this Hepatopancreas is a specialized gland that combines the functions of three parts. One is hepato means liver, pancreas means pancreas. In addition to these two, the small intestine portion of, or the function of small intestine is also done by the hepatopancreas. The small intestine otherwise functions as the complete digestion as well as absorption. So in this way, hepatopancreas, it helps in the digestion as well as absorption. That's why it is a combined portion of the liver, pancreas and the small intestine. So this is special thing with regard to the digestive system of prawn, and that has to be noted down. And then remaining portion, that is functional aspect, we have seen all functional aspect of any digestive system can be classified into 5 parts, 5 steps. One is the egestion, the ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation and egestion. So ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation and egestion. After this is the egestion is the last functional aspect of this digestive system of any animal.